everyone. Thank you, Amy. It is such an honor to have you in Cleveland for this extremely important Climate Leadership Conference. And we really want to thank the Climate Registry for choosing Cleveland to host and celebrate our city here. We are so proud to support this conference because the Cleveland Foundation recognizes the power of collective action, the only way to advance environmental and climate progress. As Amy mentioned, the Cleveland Foundation has a commitment caring for stewardship of the environment. It is in our DNA and does go back to our founding. And although we are the largest community foundation in the country, or the oldest, we are not the largest, but we do have the largest amount of discretionary dollars in the community foundation field. And I'm proud to say that not just in our history, in our early investments in the environment, but our continued and substantive grant making in the environmental space. And in recent years, we have made extraordinary strides to put our whole toolbox to work, including now $500 million of social impact investing that our board has invested just in the last 5 years. So today, the Cleveland Foundation is building what we're calling the foundation of the future, one that reframes our impact with an environmental lens, one that will transform and reimagine giving. We hope to create a new future for philanthropy where everyone can be a philanthropist, where we will create new vehicles for all donors, for individuals to join forces for change, not just those with large amounts of money, but our founding was really to create collective action, and that includes ways for individuals to join in the movement. And we believe this is paramount for not just Northeast Ohio, but for the field of philanthropy. We are building a vision for a vibrant Northeast Ohio, but one where no Clevelander is left behind. We will be investing in the growth of this region through our grant making and our social impact, targeting energy, water, land, all through a climate and environmental and an equity lens. I want to recognize a special partnership in Cleveland that you've probably heard about between the Cleveland and Gun Foundations. It is really extraordinary to have such philanthropy in Cleveland. We are a city that is lucky because of that. So I want to recognize both Stephen Love and John Mitterholzer and ask them to stand from Cleveland and Gun Foundation. Both of them have been leading the way and fighting before anybody else was for this movement. I don't think this conference would be here in Cleveland if it weren't for both of them. So protecting the environment and natural resources while tooling our economy requires collective stewardship. No single organization or administration can solve the climate crisis or protect our Great Lakes. Challenges of this magnitude, and we know this in Cleveland, require nothing short of sustained partnership, strategy, and collaboration. And that is why it is my true honor to introduce our keynote speaker today, Chris Ronayne, because he exemplifies that. He knows that it is in his DNA to understand partnership and collective action. He is putting Cleveland on the map. He is a climate leader, and it is really my honor to introduce him now to you. Chris began his career in public service at the County Planning Commission. That is where I got to know him. He later became the planning director at the City of Cleveland and the chief of staff to Mayor Jane Campbell, where he led major initiatives, innovative, transformative planning here in Cleveland that we are now standing on the shoulders of, including Cleveland's Lakefront Plan, aimed at creating a vibrant and accessible waterfront. And Chris, actually at that time, so I have to give him credit for this, took a chance on me. And he was the one who appointed me to the Planning Commission during that administration. And now I'm proud to say that I am the first female chair of the Planning Commission in the city's 200-year history. So that was because of Chris, and it was also because of his belief of importance of both local and regional planning at its core to this work as well. At the city, Chris modeled in every way how this work can be integrated. He modeled how parks, green space, our Great Lakes must be at the forefront of the city's planning to create a sustainable future. And prior to just being elected as our great county executive, he led University Circle Incorporated, and he led that major institution here for 16 years. Chris created and sustained and invested in and advanced one of the most important, and I think the best, anchor institution districts in the country, and through his leadership created a neighborhood without borders and really advanced the idea that our anchor institution initiative was doing both sustainable and equitable work before anyone was. So today, I'm thrilled to work closely with Chris as he's the Cuyahoga County executive. The Cleveland Foundation and the Cuyahoga County are in a great partnership on game-changing initiatives and shared vision for our home here in Cleveland. Chris and I have obviously known each other a very long time, and what I'd like to personally say about him and what you're going to hear today from him is that Chris is the definition of true leadership. He is someone whose passion for the region and dedication to public service has delivered not only tremendous results for Northeast Ohio, he has a bold vision for climate. He's willing to talk about it. He's framing what a healthy region looks like, and he's leading the way. He is someone that lifts others up. He recognizes the shoulders which we all stand on. He walks the walk of true collaboration. He is the glue right now that is bringing our region all together, and it is my great honor to introduce Cuyahoga County Executive and my great friend, Chris Ronayne, to the podium.
Thank you, my friend Lillian Kuri. We do go back a ways. Lillian didn't say about herself. She's an architect, a very talented one. She led a group called Cleveland Public Art for many years here in Cleveland, and she was a natural for the Planning Commission. I think you are now one of the long-standing chairs of the Planning Commission, too. So we're glad to have someone who gets it there at the City Planning Commission and continue to do just great work, and was very much the people's choice for the Cleveland Foundation CEO. So thanks again, Lillian Kuri. I'm going to say this to the tables that I know, but I want everybody to absorb this. Hello, Cleveland. Now, the reason I say that to all of you, for a few days, you're all Clevelanders. And of course, that was a reference to Spinal Tap, if you didn't catch that. So I'm still channeling the Rock Hall, Amy, from last night. It is great to have always friends here from around the world that have committed to the same causes, and that's all of us on climate. I met a partner just on the way in from Seattle who said, it's a bit of an adjustment to the time change here this morning. So I know that we've got partners from all over the room. What I usually ask is, where are you coming from? So quickly, I want to just regionally go around the room, just get a hand up if you're from Northwest United States. I'm going to start with the U.S. All right, welcome long-distance travelers. How about just West, generally California? Yeah, I knew it. Wow, look at this crowd from the West. So I'll go Southwest. Anybody out there? All right, good to see you guys. I guess Gulf region generally. Anybody from, all right, we got the Gulf states. Whoa, good turnout there. Let me call out to the Great Lakes states. All right, I knew it. A lot from Northeast Ohio, but from beyond. And let me see, as I'm going down my list, if I missed Northeast. All right. And, well, I said sort of Midwest, Great Lakes, but Midwest generally, which goes a long way out west. All right, so that's our states. Let me ask about Canada. Anybody here from Canada today? We saw some yesterday. So I was on a bike tour with a gentleman from Toronto, so we know you're out there. And anywhere else in the world? Anybody come from? Okay, so Amy, we have North America pretty well covered here. Welcome again. It is always great to have visitors to our town. Robert Kay's out there somewhere. I wanted to just cite him because he said, I came in early. There you are, Robert. I came in early and did what you said in New York. I said, come visit us for a few days. I hope you're discovering what we here in Cleveland know, which is there's always an attitude of who knew. And Robert and I talked about that last night at one of the bars. And he's been out to the Towpath Trail. And he's been out to see our metro parks. actually working on one of our Metro Parks projects. But if you get a chance, or if you get back, do see all of the region. As Lillian noted, we have an incredible Metro Parks. We have a great national park. Obviously, you've seen the Rock Hall if you were there last night. And places like where I worked in University Circle, just an incredible museum and cultural district. We hope you're enjoying this day. We hope you come back. I said to Amy, you could play hooky at 1 o'clock and go see the Guardians game. They're kind of on a roll, but they're down here at the ballpark. So listen, I obviously pitched Cleveland. I'm going to get to more of the substance of our what we're here about today. But and I just do want to double down and thank Amy Holm and the team at Climate Registry for choosing Cleveland. We'll get back to why this is important to us. But I hope you're enjoying, for those of you staying in this hotel, your experience here. You might have seen they're wearing it right down on their front door signage that they're actually about to get a county award, which actually is a distinctive award for these hotels. But we're happy because the county owns this building. So it's doing well, and it's doing well by having you here. I want to mention the Huntington Convention Center next door. We are trying to do right, even with the building facilities that we're bringing forth. The convention center actually sources food in its everyday convention business by an on-site urban farm. You may not have seen it. It's a little raised from the sidewalks that you're passing by, and it's a little below the convention center, but it is an incredible resource to just source from local foods our conventions. I think everybody can get into that business in their own communities. And we actually are built under the largest green roof of any convention center out there, which is kind of a neat feature of your next door neighbor. As for the hotel, I just wanted to say you've been to some spaces that have names that matter. The bar you were at before, if you were there, or after last night's Rock Hall, it's named Elliott's for Cleveland's famed safety director, who was Elliot Ness, who brought down Al Capone. So just a little Cleveland history. Next door is the Burnham Mall Plan. Daniel Burnham has a namesake on the restaurant, also in this building, because we take very seriously that the group mall plan was built here in Cleveland in just this beautiful space, and it was the first plan for Cleveland with classical buildings surrounding it and 7 buildings around the mall. So there's a lot of history, but I want to go one more time back to the Rock Hall. If those of you didn't know, why does Cleveland have this? The phrase was actually hatched in Cleveland. It was Alan Freed, who was a radio DJ early in the 1950s, and he was bold to really mix music, mix races and faces and those who played. And he had the first rock and roll concert known. And it was a black and tan event. It was an event where everybody mixed. It mattered. It's in our soul. Music's in our soul. But as much as the music itself, it's about the people who created it. I hope you experienced that last night. If you haven't, I hope you can get back down there. That's what we're all about in Cleveland. So again, let me now go more to what we're here about. And I really do hope you're enjoying your stay. It mattered that the Climate Registry chose Cleveland. Mayor Bibb and I pitched it, but really John and Stephen from Cleveland and Gun Foundation and Lillian and the teams, they pitched it, I think, as far back as COP. And for us, it does matter in Cleveland because we share the spirit of what we're trying to do. We share a story, and I know Mayor Bibb may have shared this a bit with you yesterday, but it can't be said enough. A local story of climate leaders that go back here to the 1960s, who never really got their just dues for being at the forefront of the Clean Water Act and ultimately the EPA. If you were coming in later yesterday or you just arrived for this morning's conference, I'm going to recast what happened. It was Carl and Lou Stokes, the first African-American mayor and Carl Stokes of a major American city, and the first African-American congressman from the state of Ohio, followed by the first African-American congresswoman from the state of Ohio right here out of Cleveland. But it was the Stokes brothers who witnessed the travesty, and that was the burning, the last burning, the 13th river burning on the surface of the Cuyahoga River in 1969. But unlike predecessors, these elected leaders stood up, and they said no more. And the river that once burned has now returned. It's important to us that we've seen bird life back, we've seen aquatic diversity back, we have seen steelhead return to the Cuyahoga River, and it is a story that we are working with the EPA to delist it as an area of concern. But obviously, like every industrial city in North America, our city, and its pollution traces back to, unfortunately, what formed us, which is the industrial legacy, but there were also the industrial spoils. So on that fateful day, June 22nd, 1969, Carl Stokes stood up, the mayor of the city of Cleveland, boldly stood up to some of our corporations and some of our industrial polluters and said, no more. This won't happen in my town. And it was a heroic effort that frankly hasn't seen enough attention to those climate leaders. That's why I think the Climate Leadership Conference matters, to cite, to celebrate, and to award to those who are out there really leading on the front line. They didn't get their credit. We ended up on Time Magazine as the city where the river burned. We ended up, frankly, a joke on Johnny Carson's show, but it was no joke. This was something that the mayor and his brother, the congressman, took seriously. The two of them acted tirelessly out of Cleveland, Ohio, to bring forth the Clean Water Act. It took the congressman and the brothers and the mayor's brother and Lou Stokes to help get that passed. For that, this place matters in the climate movement. We were a part of the catalyst for Earth Day emerging. We were cited frequently when it was ultimately brought forth in 1970 by our U.S. senators and students. We took note, they took note, that we were at the epicenter of planet pollution. That's why having the Climate Registry here matters to us. I know you can go anywhere in North America. We will in future conferences, and we look forward to joining you, but it's a privilege to have you here. I had the privilege of meeting that mayor, Mayor Stokes. I was a planning student right down the street, and after one of his lectures, I asked Mayor Stokes, could I have a cup of coffee with you? And you as climate leaders, I hope, give time to students because somebody gave you time back when. Mayor Stokes gave me time. He was already a celebrated dignitary that was going on to be a diplomat in Seychelles. He'd been a judge, he'd been a mayor, but he took time to have a cup of coffee with a kid. That was me in my early 20s that just wanted to see how his path was shaped. So he met with me, and I was inspired to get into public leadership by that half-hour coffee with Carl. But I will never forget the last words he said to me as he was walking out, and frankly, it was the last time I saw him because he went on to Seychelles and he passed away untimely. He said, change comes in inches. Change comes in inches. And I'll never forget that. I remembered it every day walking into City Hall, working for the first female mayor of the city of Cleveland, that was Jane Campbell. But every day I walked through those doors, I thought of Mayor Stokes. I thought of a guy who said, change comes in inches, and what can we do to really accelerate change, particularly as we were emerging in our framework for action in climate work. We know that climate change certainly hasn't come in inches, but our response, sadly, has come in inches. Notwithstanding the great work of the 350 plus persons at this conference and our global partners, we know that we need to accelerate the message and, more importantly, accelerate action. We have some wind in our sails now, I think, in North America. I think we are finally beginning to recognize we have to catch up. So we're trying rapidly here in Cuyahoga County. I've been at the job for 17 months with great partners. You heard from one of them a minute ago. I've got them all out throughout this room. We just hired a Chief of Climate and Sustainability. That's Janita McGowan, who's with us, came over from the corporate side of Eaton and the city of Cleveland. But we need, and leaders need, to intentionally put in their cabinets, from the president's level on through to county local officials, people who really are focused on climate and aren't just a single department doing single things, but are bedding that throughout the culture of our public sector and inspiring the private sector as well. I will say, among the initiatives, public officials like to talk about what they do, but let me first qualify this. I don't do anything alone. It's a teamwork effort. We were lucky to put some wind in the sails of a new public utility here in Cuyahoga County, which I'd love to catch up with more of you on later. Got some good advice last night from some local partners about how to scale it. But it is one of the first microgrid utilities in the country. It's going to give, thank you, and thank them. It's going to give people in a state that hasn't had choices. It's going to give them a community together to do the right thing with renewables. So we had to lead, and we've been lobbied against. We've been picked at. I'm surprised I haven't gotten sued yet, probably will somewhere, somehow. But I'll always do that for the right thing. I'll always stand up to that. Our first customers will be industrial districts and commercial districts, places like grocery stores and schools where we can scale quickly. But obviously we want to get into the residential market and really give people at an individual level a choice. Speaking of schools, we're investing significantly in solar power and educating the next generation. We've been very lucky to recently receive a $150+ million group grant, which is going to power through solar many states. But we're focused very locally on powering up our schools, financially supporting 5 local school districts here in installing solar panels on the rooftops and in collaboration with growth opportunity partners who, with the Gunn Foundation and the Cleveland Foundation, led to that very grant I was talking about. It is also an opportunity to teach our children about ways of the future and also listen. I have a 14 and 16-year-old, and I'm listening to them about their reactions to climate change. One of the heartfelt conversations I had as a dad last year was my son coming back from science class, thankfully his school, teaching science as it should be taught, without preach, but the science of science. And he came home and he said, "Dad, what are we going to do about climate change?" And I took that so seriously because Joseph was then 7th grade. 1, he's learning about it, most importantly. 2, he's thinking about what we were doing. But 3, he looked up almost as a generation and said, "What are you doing about it?" And so I keep working with our team. We developed a solar co-op program to make it easier for our residents and small businesses to go solar, and that's been in partnership with many around the room. We've led, we hope by example, with solar farms in communities around. Obviously, you're probably doing this and seeing this too in your communities. Landfills being retrofitted as solar arrays and farms, and it's been good work for us. And I want to say, again, nothing happens without partnership, but that's why we're here today, learning from each other and exploring new opportunities together. I'd be remiss, and I think we know this, it was said well yesterday by one of our panelists, we've got to create opportunities in the local employment for green economy jobs. That's the name of the game. Education, yes, but employment, yes. And transitioning in a just transition is going to mean we're going to have to transition in an all-inclusive economic way where everybody has access to jobs and innovation in the new green economy. So saying at the outset about why it matters to have you here and why our river is literally a beacon for what we're trying to do in terms of our turnaround. I am very, very pleased to announce, and I guess I can kind of announce this as an announcement at this conference. I'm looking at Lillian for permission, but it is my real privilege to say to you, we're going to start here in Cuyahoga County an initiative called the Freshwater Institute. It's something that I was inspired after a couple of trips to a couple of places around the world. One with my wife to Costa Rica. She was the Botanical Gardens director, and I just tagged along. But when we took tour after tour after tour, ambassadors that were showing us the Costa Rican cloud forests and the rainforests were young people. They were late teenagers, early 20, and they were so proud of what they had in Costa Rica. They know what they need to preserve in the rainforests. Another trip was taken up to the Great National Park at Glacier National Park. And again, was getting tours by young people. And they had something called the Glacier Institute. I said to my tour guide, probably in her mid-20s or early 20s, I said, "What are you doing here?" She says, "I've come after college and I came during college to give people tours to simply let them know what's happening." And those two, issues at the bookends of preserving what we have and letting them know what's actually happening is what's motivating the Freshwater Institute. Been to COP a couple of times with some of the partners in this room, and we've noticed that fresh water has not been sort of brought forth enough as a conversation piece. And we are here just blocks from the Great Lakes, and 20% of the world's fresh water supply and 90% of North America's understand our stewardship responsibility, but we've got to get the message out. So the Freshwater Institute is about education, it's about, and having the kids learn the story of the Stokes brothers, have them become those future stewards a la the Costa Rican tour guides that are kids that understand what their next generation is going to protect. It's about research, working with partners like the Ohio State Sea Grants program to understand what we have and how to preserve. And it's about non-extraction economic development. It's about looking at water industries and looking at it in a circular economy and seeing what we have and what we can protect and what we can advance in terms of green energy jobs and the blue economy. The Freshwater Institute will help us in all of this, but obviously we're out, like you are, for a resilient and healthy future. Our approach to water management, conservation, restoration will, we hope, set a new standard. But I would not be here, as I mentioned, the partnership, without the Cleveland Foundation, that's why I looked at you, Lillian, who just endowed our new director, soon to be hired here as the first director of the Freshwater Institute. We look forward to working with you from our region on what we need to do to really continue to protect our climate, but get going on the work that needs to happen. So in addition to the Cleveland Foundation, we've had support from Congresswoman Shontel Brown, a new congressperson, relatively speaking, but somebody who gets it locally, just a real leader in our community. So this local and national support will ensure for us, we hope, a healthier community, a healthy lake, and a healthy economy. I ran on the issues of just that. A healthy community starts with a healthy climate. And yeah, we don't duck the question. We never duck the words. None of you do. But public leaders have to not just duck and dodge, they have to lead. They have to lead with conversations on climate, and not just conversations. We got to lead on action. So I hope you understand that we're a partner to you always in the future, and I want you to continue to come back and help us think through everything from green energy to the continued protection, preservation of the Great Lakes. It's your lakes too. It's a North American treasure. So I am grateful for you being here today, and I see we've really actually filled the room. I was really just the warm-up act to our next speaker, but I can't say enough. My local partners, thank you. Thank you to our foundations. Thank you to the nonprofits that are helping move the needle, and to our for-profits who are exploring things all around how they can do business better in Northeast Ohio. But I'd like to now introduce our global climate change leader, who's your next forum moderator, Managing Director of there we go, that's what I was hoping to see. I'll get back to this picture in a minute. Managing Director of Pollination, Rick Saines. Yes, hey, it's a rock and roll town. How many heard Rick jam in the garage? I got you there, right? I found it on the internet last night. If you heard him jam, he's obviously not just a leader in climate work, but he is a fun guy too. And I just learned a little while ago that he and I went to school together. But let me come back to that. I'll give him the formal introduction and then tell you what I learned. Rick's globally recognized as a climate change leader, and for over 2 decades has advised governments, multinational companies, financial institutions, funds, and project sponsors on the economic transition to a low-carbon economy, including being a thought leader on carbon and environmental market transaction. He has officially ranked Chambers USA and Chambers Global as a leading climate change lawyer, and in his accolades to him in his many decades of work. Rick serves on the board of the Climate Registry. You're lucky to have him, Amy. He's a true champion for this Climate Registry, the Governing Council of the International Emissions Trading Association, AIDA, and the Board of Advisors to the USC Schwarzenegger Initiative. He's been awarded the Chevalier of National Order of the Merit by the President of the Republic of France for his significant contribution to the preparation of the Paris Climate Summit and the implementation of the Paris Agreement, all in. Now I have to say, I met him on a rooftop in New York when we were continuing to pitch Cleveland with Amy and the team at Climate Registry, and he said, you know, I went to a school in Ohio. That was Miami University of Ohio. We kept talking. I said, I went there too, and we realized we were students at the same time. I realized I was a face in the crowd to Rick, because Rick jammed, and I remember the band. He rock and rolled with a band as a drummer called Storytown. And then last night I was intrigued again. I went back and found your picture because I think this is all a part of what defines you. He even said in one of his social media posts I looked at that he is a never to recover drummer from a rock and roll band. So in the rock and roll city, it is my pleasure to introduce our next moderator, Rick Saines. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Okay, everybody, come on. Let's give it up for Chris. I mean, how many dynamic leaders match Chris? I mean, it's seriously, Chris, you are somebody to watch. I'm saying it here, I'm saying it now. You know, thank you for your leadership. I mean, and Ohio needs it. The Midwest needs it, the United States needs it, the world needs it. And, you know, so thank you. Really awesome, awesome stuff. All right, cool. I'm gonna go sit over here now. Okay, well, again, thank you very much for that ridiculously over-the-top fun thing. And I did take a picture. I'll send it to the band guys. They're going to get a total kick out of it, I tell you. All right, we have a really, hopefully a really awesome panel here. Pressure's on you guys. I'm just the moderator, so. But, let's reflect a little bit for a second. Hopefully most of us all did have a really wonderful time last night. And there's a little bit of a paradox there, because we're here at the Climate Leadership Conference because we all have devoted our professional and really our personal lives to tackling a very, very daunting, difficult challenge. And that can be kind of overwhelming, and it can, a lot of times our conversations have a tinge of negativity to them because, the facts are not great in terms of our progress. And as Chris said, we're making incremental progress by inches, and we need to be having much bigger step change there. But we'll get into that a little bit and some opportunities that might be, catalyst for hope. But I do want to say that this theme of the conference, Amy, that you've organized is really really important and really good, because this idea of partnership, collaboration, community, and equity, which just permeates all of the conversations we're having. When you think about what needs to be done, we're not going to get it done unless we actually have some fun together from time to time. We get to know each other a little bit better. We break down kind of those artificial barriers that we carry with us every day. And we listen and learn from each other in a way that allows us to do a little bit more collectively than we would have done before we came to this conference. And part of that is hanging out with each other and having some fun and breaking it down. And the mood in the room, the spirit, and obviously, Chris, you bring that everywhere you go. It's really remarkable. But let's capitalize on that. Really, let's capitalize on what this Cleveland has given to us. And I will say, hello, Cleveland. All right, let's do that. So with that, let me turn to the session now. We have really three great panelists. Ethan Zindler, immediately to my left, is the climate counselor for Secretary Yellen. We're really happy to have you, Ethan. Appreciate that. Lisa Jacobson is the president of the Business Council for Sustainable Energy. Lisa, thank you. And Scott Tu, who's executive vice president of energy efficiency and sustainability at Trane Technologies. And the thesis and the theme for this panel is picking up on what we talked about yesterday, which is this. I think one of our speakers called it the trifecta. And that's policy, technology, and finance. And how do we optimize those pillars, really, for the kind of change, the kind of transformation that we need? And, one thing about this is change is scary, but it's also exciting. And so our job is to make change exciting and see the opportunity and be creative and innovative and embrace this transformation as a positive, job-creating, life-enriching, prosperity-enhancing moment. And that is what is going to create a buzz and an attraction to this. The conversation on climate, easily slides into the sort of the negative. And we need to reflect on that and understand that and not sugarcoat it, right? But we're not going to solve it being depressed about it. We have to get out there and do what's necessary. So, okay, that's my soapbox. I'm going to go now to the panel. Why don't we do this? Why don't we just go down, and if everybody can just tell a little bit about what you're doing, your role. And I think a lot of people, Ethan, don't actually know what the climate counselor to Secretary Yellen is, or what it is, what your role is. So just each of you just talk a little bit about your job, what you do, and then I'd like for you all, in the spirit of breaking down the barriers, to also identify a fun fact that you can't look up on the internet at 2 o'clock in the morning. Ethan.
Well, thanks, Rick. And Well, first, I mean, if I could just build off first your comment and just to really maybe violently agree with you on the need to be very positive about all of this stuff. And, you know, I've been working in the industry for about 20 years and joined the Treasury Department about a year ago. And, you know, one of the major changes, and we focus, as you say, very much on the troubling facts around climate change and the growing threat. But I would argue that we are at an incredibly optimistic time in the sense that the technologies have evolved to an enormous extent. We can come back and talk about these trends a little bit more. But the other thing is the sheer volume of money that's now flowing into this industry is topping about $1 trillion per year. And so when I first began, and maybe when you first started working in the space, the conversation we often had to have with people is, well, the world's going to change to deal with these problems, and there's going to be a lot of investments going to come, and a lot of people kind of rolled their eyes and didn't believe that. We've now, I think, past an important threshold, and the paradigm has shifted where people do understand that there is a lot of money to be made here. We should talk about some of those opportunities around that. And when you see over $1 trillion a year being invested in this space, you now have countries, including the United States, that are crafting policies where we can be the ones to try and take advantage of what is, I would argue, the most important and biggest economic opportunity of the 21st century, which is how to deal with climate change. And so I think there are a lot of great opportunities there. All right, now let me try to actually answer your question.
Can I just do something? So let's pause for a second. Say that again. Biggest opportunity, economic opportunity in the 21st century.
In my view, without question. I mean, we're already seeing well over $1 trillion being invested a year in this space. The numbers have to probably triple if you want to try and get on a path towards net zero. So that's the not good news is that, you know, we need a lot more, but the good news is we've come a long, long way up to this point. Now, real quick about me, I'm the climate counselor to Secretary Yellen. Like I said, I've been in the job for about a year. For those outside of Washington, you may not think of the Treasury Department as sort of on the front lines of addressing climate change. For those of you who are in Washington, you probably do know that one of the things that we do is we write key parts of the tax code, which is about how a lot of social policy and other policy gets done in the United States. So we're very critically important role that we play related to climate change because there's so many tax credits that are intended to spur the technologies to address climate change. The Treasury Department also oversees the funds that the United States puts into the World Bank and the other multilateral institutions, many of which we are trying to encourage to invest more in climate change. So in a very small nutshell, that's some of the stuff that Treasury does. And my role is to advise the Secretary, but also work with the other departments within the Treasury who don't have climate necessarily in their titles to try and integrate climate into all the work that they do in a fundamental way. And the last thing, to answer your actual question about a mildly fun fact about me, which I can't compare to Rick on the drums, but I did work for 3 years at MTV a long time ago when they still had music.
Where were you when we needed you, Ethan? Where were you?
Yeah.
Anyway. Really quickly, and Lisa, I'll turn to you in just a second, but you know, what Chris said in his keynote was governments at all levels need to not just have a department, but they need to inculcate climate as a strategic, cross-cutting opportunity. And what you just said about your role is that you work with all the other branches to help create coherence policy-wise. Is that
the role was set up by President Biden really in the first couple months of his presidency with exactly that idea, which was that we wanted to coordinate the efforts across the Treasury Department so that they synced up and so that we could integrate climate into everything that we did.
Very cool. Thanks, Ethan. Okay, Lisa.
Yes, and that in of itself is a major transformation. I mean, I would agree also that we are at a historic moment, but things have changed. We're at this pivot time, and certainly my organization seeks to be at the front lines of that. I work for an organization called the Business Council for Sustainable Energy. I'm proud to serve as its president and been involved working with clean energy, energy efficiency companies and trade associations for over 20 years. And you know, we are a lifetime away from where we are when I got into the energy industry, and it's because of that trifecta. And now with the policy frameworks we have here in the United States at the federal level, supporting and leveraging what's going on at the state and local level, we have opportunities we've never had before. And we're having conversations on policy and on business models and technology innovation that we wouldn't have had because we couldn't get over that market signal hurdle. We have those market signals now, and I know we're going to get into more details on that in the discussion, but the Business Council works with policymakers. It's all about public-private partnership. And that's why I enjoy coming to this conference. And even just this morning, you know, having coffee with someone who I hadn't met before, who works for a local government, you know, was saying how much he enjoys this conference because there are companies here, the private sector is here. And I said, well, actually, all the conferences I go, we want to meet with the local policymakers. So commend you, Amy, and your team and your board, because you are bringing together at this critical moment those that need to come together with community organizations to take us to the next level of transformation. So, you know, you asked about a fun fact. Well, you know, my fun fact is a little personal. You know, my youngest child's graduating from high school in a couple weeks, so to me that's very special and is on my mind. But now the next conference I go to, they're going to say, well, tell me a fun fact, and I'm be like, well, I sang at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame a couple weeks ago. So I'm very excited to have that. Thank you.
Very good. Great. Scott.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Rick, for moderating, and Chris for that great opening. It was really inspiring. I love to hear a local leader who can talk so passionately about the situation that we're in and also be so optimistic, to Lisa's point. I'm Scott, too. I work for Trane Technologies, the world's largest heating, ventilation, air conditioning company, a company you don't think about until you really need us. Typically, we're the problem that you don't want to handle. If you're in your home, we cool homes and buildings like this one. We're 1 out of every 2 commercial buildings in North America depends on us for some level of service for its comfort, as well as we also cool most of the world's fresh food. So if it's transported globally, we're cooling 60+% of it in 144 countries. So via our Thermo King brand. So we have a lot of brands. Trane, many people know. Thermo King's the transport refrigeration company. And we've been cooling and heating for a very long time. And the reason I'm up here is because there's so many great things happening. What we've witnessed, to Chris and to Rick's point, over the past decade has been this transition with the energy grid. There's also been this great transition in EVs, so the transportation grid has also been transforming. The next big frontier for us and great opportunities is in transforming the built environment. So happy to share some thoughts.
All right, cool.
Today.
We'll dig into that. And what was the fun fact?
Oh, the fun fact. I could have stolen some of these others. I'll go with another one. This year, after several years of thinking through, I collect and save heirloom plants. I have an environmental plant background, and I collect them all. This year, I designed the garden of my dreams, and it's in. Not only is it in progress, it's built, and things are greening and blooming. So that's my fun fact for the year.
That's fantastic. Great. Well done. All right, let's dig in. I want to start with you, Ethan. So this is going to sound like a softball pitch for you to kind of promote all the achievements of the administration, but
I'll take it.
here it is, 16 inches. Here we go. But I think it's important, though, to talk about it. Can you, at a high level set, because this panel is about policy, finance, and technology, and you know, those in this room, myself personally, we've been working on trying to get comprehensive climate legislation at the federal level, you know, for as long as we've been working on professionals in the space. And, you know, it should be noted that there has been some massive achievements. We talked a little bit about the IRA, and we go right into it, and we just start, you know, talking about the IRA. But I actually don't know how much of the specifics of how it works, why it was crafted that way, et cetera, and what the implications of how it was crafted mean for durability and things like that. Can you just give us a high-level spin through where we're at, you know, with the achievements legislatively?
Sure.
Thank you.
So thanks for that. Yeah, then that was nice and soft, so I'll take it. So listen, the you know, a basic statement, which is that, you know, the Biden administration, I think, and thanks to Congress, working with Congress, has passed 3 really monumental bills to promote investing in America. And the last 2 with a particular emphasis on climate, and the third one, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed in the summer of 2022, is without question the most consequential piece of climate legislation ever passed at the federal level in the United States. And it's a big part of why I'm working in government now. I was in the private sector before, but it is, it offers unprecedented level of support of the technologies that will help us address climate change. It is broad in terms of the scope of it, how it tries to provide the funds, from seeking to promote manufacturing all the way upstream to the extraction of some of the materials that we need to make things like batteries, all the way down to the consumer level by providing tax credits for things like putting electric vehicles in your garage or putting solar on your roof. It is multi-sectoral in that it provides help from everything from solar to wind to batteries to other emerging technologies, and including energy efficiency, which is such an important part of everything. So the scope is enormous. The dollar commitment is in the hundreds of billions. I'll talk just for a second about the role that the Treasury Department plays, and I think we are particularly important in all of it because the majority of the money is due to be spent via tax credits, which are essentially tax cuts to give people motivation to do various types of clean energy activities. And there were about 24 provisions in the IRA that touch on all the different areas that I just mentioned a moment ago. And what we're doing at the Treasury Department is we are busy trying to write the regulations to implement each one of those provisions. So far, we've issued about 50 pieces of guidance to try and fill in the blanks and the details on how to go about taking advantage of those. And it is really broad. It is, I will confess, complicated. And I think for those outside of government, probably even more so. We try to do our best to explain it. But fundamentally, when we talk about these tax credits or tax cuts, they are, I like to think of them as a series of potentially millions of public and private partnerships, in the sense that basically we at Treasury are trying to create the opportunities, but we then rely on those in the private sector, and I'll come back to this in a second, those in government and NGOs as well, for the uptake. So these aren't like grant programs where you have to write long applications and then we review them. These are situations where if you do certain things when you go to file your taxes, you can take the tax credit. In fact, in some cases, if you go to buy an electric vehicle, there's about 13,000 dealers in the United States where at the point of sale, you'll get a discount on the EV, and the dealer is the one that takes the $7,500 tax credit. So there's some very simple ways that we work with the private sector. But coming back to my point about the fact that it's really a partnership, it's really incumbent on us at Treasury not just to write these rules, but to make sure that people understand what these opportunities are and how to take advantage of them. And in particular, maybe to this audience, I did want to mention the so-called elective pay benefit. And essentially, this allows you to take the benefit of the tax credit in cash instead of reducing your tax bill. And why that's so important is that for local governments, for state governments, for NGOs, well, you don't pay taxes, so a tax credit doesn't really do you any good. But you can now access the benefit of these tax credits and take the benefit in cash. And I mention that because it creates all kinds of opportunities for localities and others to take advantage of without waiting on their states. It's not a block grant program. You just have to act on your own. And if you want more information about it, happy to share it with folks afterwards. But anyway, sorry I've gone from kind of the macro all the way to the micro, but that's one kind of pitch I wanted to get out there given the audience and the opportunities for localities, including those obviously here in Ohio, to take advantage of.
That's great. Okay. So I want to come back to you and talk a little bit more about the politics, but more the policy and the durability features of this legislation. But let me move to Lisa. Let me ask you. You've been working on a report for a while, and you just put out a really remarkable report. And I don't know how many of the folks in the room have had the opportunity to read it and study the findings of it, but it's a pretty cool analysis, and it really identifies some pretty relevant trends to what we're talking about. Can you just tell everybody what's going on there and give us a bit of a highlight tour of that?
Sure. Thank you very much. And it's kind of fun to be on this panel because there's somebody on the panel who's very involved in this report from the beginning, Ethan Zindler, and his former job with Bloomberg NEF. But the Business Council for Sustainable Energy in partnership with Bloomberg NEF, each year releases something called the Sustainable Energy in America Fact Book. And really, it's a chronicle of the energy transition in the United States. It's data, it's facts. What's unique about it is the ability of Bloomberg NEF to provide probably some of the most up-to-date economic information, as well as tracking of sectors that really don't get as much attention as they should or historically haven't. And so it's really a guidebook to where we are. We cover this whole trifecta. We cover economics, we cover technology trends and deployment trends, we cover policy when it's significant. And this 12th year of the fact book that came out in February really is a showpiece of what we can say the market signals are from the suite of policies that Ethan just described. And also, I mean, I'm going to talk primarily about some of the federal policy impacts, but none of that's possible without the state and local. So I think that it's not just the federal policies, it's everything together, and it's everything that all of you in this room have worked for 15, 20 years in terms of having that policy foundation that says to the business community, we're ready to invest, and we're communities that want to work in partnership with you. So just briefly, the headline from the fact book this year, I was surprised. I really didn't know what the data was going to show, because every year it's a little different, and we've had some really tough years. I mean, we had high interest rates last year. We still had supply chain disruptions. A lot of the commodities that go into energy transition technologies were having challenges, transportation, and again, lots of cost, right? But the policy foundation we had really punched that back. I mean, I'm going to use those strong words. It beat back otherwise what would have been macro trends that would have been very, damaging to the energy transition. But across the board, for technologies that were mature, think of renewable energy, think of energy efficiency, we saw record-breaking years. For technologies that are kind of very much needed, but perhaps slower growing, we saw them really kickstart. And as a result, I mean, the U.S. had a record-breaking year in energy transition investment, as well as the globe, as you said, over $300 billion. And when you look at the announcements, project announcements, we tracked, now it's much higher, but at the end of the year, over 100 very significant announcements representing about $260 billion in investment. Just in the last year, this is what we saw. So, I mean, this is a strong foundation. Back to the corollary, if we really want to think about where we need to go for net zero, this needs to threefold, fourfold in all areas. But this is a change moment. This is one of those pivot moments, as I said before. So we're very encouraged. Happy to talk. There's so much more to share, but big picture is this is a structural change. Communities, customers, businesses want these technologies for the multiple benefits that they provide, reliability, affordability. When you look at them as a portfolio, you can't look at any one technology on its own. This is a portfolio, and certainly if you look across America, it's going to be a portfolio of solutions. So the last point I'll make on this is why I think it was so strong across the board is because some of the policies that were adopted really were big tent approaches. Many technologies we can't even envision yet, will have an opportunity to compete because of the way these policies were set up, and that's extremely important. We can't be looking at narrow paths on the policy front. We're going to mute the signals. We're going to miss the moment. We have to have a portfolio approach, and then the market will respond. And that's what the data showed. I mean, the data clearly showed that.
Wow. Okay, thanks, Lisa. Scott, you just heard from Ethan and Lisa and the significance of the policy achievements and starting to get into, all right, what's been the actual response and the financing and the catalyzing of that? I mean, from Train's perspective, from your perspective, how are you feeling it? How are you seeing it? And what does it do for your strategy going forward?
Look, when I think back, I mean, everyone in the room has their own stories about what's happened in the past decade. It's always easier to tell a story looking backwards, but none of us could have imagined some of the advancements that have happened. It's a moment that we should be hopeful about for what comes next. 15 years ago, we didn't even know the right questions to ask. I began this role 15 years ago, and I was in the sort of a small group of companies attempting to find new value and doing things differently, like in the built environment. Fast forward, the Paris Climate Accord changed things. What did it change? In particular, not just a global commitment and target for the globe, but that led to an avalanche of targets at the city level for cities like Cleveland, nations, but also for companies. And public commitments and targets drive behaviors. And that's what we've seen that's really been a great catalyst over the past decade, say, since Paris, which has been almost 9 years. So that really spurred all types of innovation, new investments, and then this searching for how do we get all the right pieces together, to Lisa and Ethan's points. And we've seen that in the built environment. Look at the green building standards that have come out in the past decade. So we have green building standards, we have efficiency regulations and voluntary certifications that have led to really step changes on efficiency gains, which is a direct corollary to emissions reductions. And we've had these public commitments that all of that combined is really a great soup for how we've made such huge advances in the built environment. That we're not there yet. There's this next level is what's also exciting, but those things have already happened. And now looking back, we can see how much that has given us in terms of reductions.
And are you, I mean, just drilling in a bit on that, are you, do you have a strategy to look at how to, implement more energy efficiency, renewables, in the built environment as a consequence of the IRA and other legislation, and thinking about how to access some of that money? And in particular, the interesting thing is the bonus formulas for, underserved communities, and so the equity piece that we've been talking about that Chris mentioned, that's actually hardwired in to the structure of the federal legislation, which is pretty remarkable as well. I mean, to speak to what is that? How does that affect your
here's what it's done.
decision-making?
It's changing business models. Is what it's doing. This combination in partnerships with local co-op utilities and/or energy service provider companies, where we're thinking about new ways to finance energy efficiency upgrades to the built environment. That's number one. You heard Chris speak about things like green roofs. All these things now are more commonplace because we found ways to finance it. We also can measure their value, unlike what we could do even a decade ago. So today's table stakes is not what it was a decade ago. It's this next generation of things. So the business model is changing, but also it's forcing companies like Trane Technologies to change how we do what we do. 100 years, we were cooling buildings like this one relatively the same way. We put in a system to heat the building for cold areas. We put in a separate system to cool the building in certain areas, and both of those systems ran simultaneously. Both of them consumed a tremendous amount of energy, and the heating side was burning fossil fuels to heat the space. We've been burning fossil fuels since the cave days, and it's high time that ended, and it can now, and thanks to things like the IRA funding for heat pumps and geothermal systems, that is now the commonplace. We should no longer be installing fossil fuel burning systems in buildings to heat it. But more than that, we now have combined those systems. It's now one system. It uses less energy. It's zero fossil fuel dependent. And in countries like Europe, where maybe the building did not have cooling, it provides free cooling to the occupants. And so what you get there is you're checking all the boxes. It's changing the business model. Regulators love it because it's helping them reduce emissions. Building owners love it because it's coming with it comes with a new upside in terms of cooling and heating. And we really changed the way that we finance all of that as well, because there's so many new possibilities around return on value for those types of investments.
That's really cool. I mean, and just a comment as a consumer, I guess, when you're looking to lease space or move into, space, the degree to which the built environment, that building has a LEED certification or is viewed as having these kind of dynamic control systems and is really efficient, and that factors in to the class of building stock that you can do, and that affects what you can charge tenants. And and so the new is what people want, and the new is really where we're going, and it's really, so there's an alignment there fundamentally, which is really cool. Ethan, can we just talk for a second about respectfully the political environment, and how was the IRA crafted in such a way to you know, be durable enough to withstand what is a, you know, a weird, is that a technical term? Just a weird politics in this country. Because in order for the big bets to be made, in order for the trajectory to really get, you know, irreversibly and, you know, solidly entrenched and accelerate beyond the politics, the policies have to stay when the politics change. So talk a little bit about how that went into the thinking about the IRA.
Yeah, so, I mean, listen, I guess I wasn't there to write the IRA and wasn't part of the, you know, wasn't on the Hill working on the legislation, but maybe I'll speak to what I view as the current dynamic and why we're confident that the work that we're doing will have longevity. So, you know, since the start of the administration, we've seen over $800 billion invested in clean energy in the U.S. From the passage of the IRA through the first 12 months afterwards, we saw about $250 billion. We've seen well over $100 billion invested in electric vehicle and battery manufacturing alone since the passage of the IRA. So we're seeing a lot of capital flows, and we're seeing the economic benefits really be dispersed across the United States to all parts of the country. And I think it's important to note that disproportionately the money has been flowing to counties that have below median income levels, below median employment levels, below median education levels in terms of college education rates. So the money is flowing to lots of parts of the country that had not been receiving this kind of support. So our view is that a lot of these manufacturing plants are either just opening or are under construction with the jobs and the hiring very well underway. I was in Elizabethtown, Kentucky the other day with the secretary for a plant that's just opening that is going to make coating materials for batteries. You know, those economic benefits are going to be felt far and wide. And when we do, we feel like that will make sure that the IRA will have longevity, because ultimately, I think everybody wants these economic opportunities that are created. Frankly, whether you are you adhere to believing in climate change or not, you do recognize the benefits. And I think going back to your very original point, which I was agreeing with, which is, given the size of the economic opportunity, I mean, it only makes sense that we try to participate in this party and that we do the best that we can to have the U.S. be a global leader. And I think we're making really important progress. And I think that message ultimately will filter all the way down to voters in the long run.
That's interesting. But let me just stay on it for a second. But I mean, as I understand it, the nature of what it is, I mean, a lot of us have worked on trying to get a carbon price, right? And that's just very difficult because the politics of that are just really tricky. But when it's a tax credit that's statutorily extended for 10 years, you don't need an appropriation for it, right? I mean, it's a credit, and if you do the work and you achieve the outcomes that the credit supports, you get the credit.
Yeah, no.
And so
yeah.
that's the sort of policy. Well, that's sort of what I'm getting. I mean, do you see that as a little bit of a hedge against the political winds?
Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that, which is something I should have done originally. Most of the tax credits have a 10-year lifespan to them. And so, as you say, that was legislated by Congress. What we're just doing at the Treasury Department is writing the details about how you go out and take advantage of these tax credits. So those are on the books and part of the IRA and part of law. They are not contingent on annual funding from Congress ultimately. So it's a very good point that the IRA was passed and built to last.
Cool. All right, so where are we? We're 9:43 on my clock. What do we have, Amy? How much time do we have? I'm supposed to wrap this up in 2 minutes?
Check it on the clock. You've got a few minutes.
Oh, there's a clock down there. Yeah, how about that? Right there. It's called the idiot clock.
Yeah,
the
although it says we're
moderator.
overtime, so I don't know.
Yeah.
if that's
Okay, we have 8 minutes.
Can
All
I,
right.
can I just add on
Sure.
something? Because Ethan said it a couple times, but as he said it, it crystallized to another level. I mean, the real strength of using the tax code is the due diligence. I mean, it's a lot of levels of strength, but it really leverages private sector investment. And all the due diligence is done by the community and the project investors and the project participants, right? So it's a very different model. So there's a lot more buy-in, there's a lot more leverage, and it just kind of takes on a strength and a resilience on its own. And I think that is very attractive on a bipartisan basis. In fact, the tax credits in different forms have been supported on a bipartisan basis, going back to the early 1990s. So I think that they are very durable, and the modernization of them through the Inflation Reduction Act in particular is very attractive as well. In particular, this 10-year window, we've never had that. My organization's worked for those across the board, that type of policy, for as long as I've been in the industry. So this is really significant. But yes, the tax code is one part of the Inflation Reduction Act, but there's something else that I really look to that I think over time, in the first year, we're still getting the rules and getting up and running, is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which basically seeds money to states and localities, and many of that will be done on a revolving fund basis. So again, just where can we leverage? Where can we create partnership? That's not all going to be evident in the first year or two of these programs or these tax credits. It's going to take a few years for us all to move together to realize them. But I think if we have this conference in 2 or 3 years, Amy, we'll be talking about a very different landscape, and the benefits will be diverse. And it's not, of course, the environment is on our mind, but it's not just for the environment. It's for, relieving energy burden. We had a lot of conversation at a workshop we did on community investment yesterday about what communities are facing, all communities, but obviously lower income communities with high energy burdens. They're going to get benefits from this. We're going to lower the cost of energy. We're going to make clean energy more available. And it's going to modernize our energy system and provide us more resilience and reliability. Everybody's talking about increases in load growth right now, and we have an opportunity to modernize our energy system and address the challenges we're facing today that may be tied in some ways to the environment, but also may be completely apart from the environment. So we're in an invest in the energy system moment, and this is the set of technologies we're going to pick.
Yeah, super cool. So let's stay on that for a bit. I mean, and you guys know I sent this, in advance around this electrification question. You said it, Lisa, and I think Scott, you highlighted as well. This is a portfolio approach. It's not a silver bullet situation where, we can this is the answer, and as long as we all agree that this is the one thing we're going to do, and that's and there's such a psychology around that. I mean, how many times have we talked about this, and people want to know what is the answer, and the answer is it's like everything, But is it really everything? I mean, I guess my question is, there are certain sectors that are going to need to be transitioned out of. I mean, let's face it, coal is not a future sector for the economy. And even with CCS, the data says it. The data says it in the reports that you do, and we know that. But how do we, question for the group, how do we make sure that these communities are transitioned in a way that is, respectful, and also with that comes the political viability of achieving it. That's tricky. I mean, let's not forget who was the senator that was really the key senator at the end of the day to ensure that this thing got passed, and to his credit, he voted for it, but that's Senator Manchin, right, from West Virginia. And Ohio has a lot of the same challenges too, in terms of communicating the imperative, but also kind of figuring out how are we innovative in the way in which we can create transition in these communities. Does anybody want to speak to that?
Well, I think we have to do that combination that we've been talking about. We need this combination of incentives to do different things. We need investments to make that happen as well. We're going to need some first movers in the marketplace as well. For my company, we're thinking about new materials for our products, and to do that requires us to find new partners and suppliers, the willingness to potentially have a purchase order on a material that we've not purchased before, or maybe a low carbon version of a material. Many times the first cost can be higher. So we have to find new ways to be either more productive or to find customers who have a pull for that. So we're using all the market mechanisms on the other end of the spectrum that Ethan works on to make sure that this combination works. But it's the same combination. It's incentives, it's regulatory, and it's a first mover ability to specify and to put things in the marketplace.
Very cool. All right. Did you want to contribute?
I'll just add, first, I appreciate the question and the framing of it in a respectful way. And I think that we do need to be respectful of the fact that these communities are what provided so much of the energy that allowed us to get to where we are today and built America into the great nation that it is. And so I would say that the IRA, and I realize that every question you ask Rick, my answer is always tax credit, but here's another one, which is that the IRA specifically has provisions intended to try to drive investment into what it deems to be energy communities, and this does include communities that may be focused on coal extraction, but others as well. And we've been busy writing the guidelines on that, and there's an extra bonus credit you can get if the investment you make is in one of these communities, and it's something that we've worked a lot on. I would mention one other thing, coming back to my point earlier about the fact that it's great that we're doing all this, but we need to communicate it. We at Treasury have identified what we called 150 comeback communities, and we've been out, including the Secretary and others, talking in these communities specifically about the IRA so that people can understand the opportunities and how to take advantage of them. I think there's 23 communities that are comeback communities in the state of Ohio specifically, but it's worth noting that the amount of money that we're seeing invested in a lot of these parts of the country are really, really strong. So just to take the Ohio numbers for a second, over $10 billion in EV and battery investment so far, not related to clean energy, but $28 billion in electronics and semiconductors as well. So a lot that's already come in and a lot that we hope to see going forward as well. But I think it's the right question to ask, and we want to try and do this in a respectful way. The role of coal in power generation has been declining very rapidly over the last 10 to 20 years. It's likely to continue as these other technologies get added, but that does create economic needs in some parts of the country.
That's fantastic. All right, I know we're at time. I mean, ultimate idiot moderator. I looked at the clock, and then I asked the question that was like the hardest question as the time was up. But listen, I just want to thank all of you. Really, really fascinating discussion, and let's give it a round of applause to the. Excellent. Thank you. All right. And they are literally waiting in the wings. Sorry, guys. Really excited to introduce Lori, who's going to moderate the next panel. Lori and I have the honor of serving on the TCR board together, and Lori's just started a new, exciting, job. And I don't know if you're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, good. All right, you will. It's really, really cool, and it goes to this whole issue of new types of business models that can really achieve catalytic improvements in climate. So Lori, please, come on up. Next panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, everyone. That was a great panel and a topic very near to my heart, which is particularly that confluence of finance policy and technology as tremendously important drivers for decarbonization. And I'd like to invite you now to listen in as we focus on some innovative game changers, or what we're calling climate disruptors. As we know, the path to net zero relies on, as we talked about, new partnerships and particularly new technologies and new initiatives that will disrupt the status quo and lead to radical and accelerated change. We're excited to present to you a lightning round of these climate disruptors and spotlighting the transformative actions that these three professionals are particularly optimistic to share with you today. I'd like to just discuss very quickly a little bit about what Rick mentioned, is that I have recently joined a new organization, which is DRAX, and I've been invited about 3 months ago to take on the role as president of a new organization for global BECCS development, and interested in looking at opportunities right here in this region for the development of biomass energy, carbon capture and storage projects. And so hopefully you'll hear more about that in the future. And as we move forward with this panel, I'm going to sit down and hand things right off to Adam Klauber, Vice President of Sustainability and Digital Supply Chain with World Energy. Adam.
Come to the podium. So thank you for coming here today. So a little bit about World Energy. World Energy is a renewable fuels developer. We produce sustainable aviation fuel, renewable diesel, and green hydrogen. We have about $15 billion of projects in the pipeline, including our project in Paramount, California, in Los Angeles, a Houston sustainable aviation fuel plant, and then a green hydrogen plant off the coast of Newfoundland in Stephenville. So here it goes. Last month, we witnessed the near destruction of Science-Based Targets Initiative as their leadership proposed the acceptance of market-based measures without checking first with their technical staff. Colleagues often ask me, how do I stay patient in the high-stakes game of carbon accounting, given that at any turn, potentially, the NGOs that are the gatekeepers of these systems potentially could pass rules that will have major effects on our business. And I attribute my patience back to the first job I had after college. I had these joyful visions of leading groups, scaling mountains, crossing glaciers, navigating whitewater rivers. However, based on my actual technical experience and qualifications, Outward Bound offered me an internship with Youth at Risk in Florida. My students were there all by choice. Their judges offered them 8+ months in military boot camp, or they could endure a 30-day outdoor expedition, learning to work together with peers who had limited impulse control and were working on anger management. Job highlights included, and these are all actual, helicopter evacuations, chasing runaways across state lines, group mutinies, stolen guns from a hunting camp, and frequently, profound personal transformations. If these kids could pull off self-reliance, backcountry navigation, and anger management by the end of a month-long course, surely the climate community can find a way forward for market-based mechanisms. So how's my company helping us to get there and achieve net zero for the hardest to abate industries? Here's the concept that my team worked on. First, we want to recognize that climate-supporting actions anywhere within a sector's value chain are a valid way to get to net zero emissions. If you substitute the fuel, for example, for aviation, somewhere in the United States, let's say in California where we have our facility, but the buyer is in New York, that should be a valid intervention called an inset. And second, the new innovation that we are building off of is the recognition that in the carbon accounting world, as many of you know, there's something called Scope 3 indirect supply chain emissions. Well, it just so happens that one company is not the sole owner of a Scope 3 emissions. There are multiple Scope 3 entities. So if there can be multiple responsible parties for the same emission, why don't we create a mechanism that allows us to stack the contributions from multiple parties who have the same responsibility for an emission? So that has opened up a whole new door of opportunities for us. And worked on this concept originally with the World Economic Forum when I was at the Rocky Mountain Institute, and also have advanced the accounting mechanisms through the Smart Freight Center, if people are familiar with that organization based in Amsterdam. So what we did was created something called the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Certificate, the SAF-C. And it was modeled in many ways off the renewable energy credits in the United States. The innovation also here is that the renewable energy credits, the RECs for electricity, are based on the electrons, right, and claiming ownership for those. They're not tied to the emissions reductions. So we wanted a robust approach where we could recognize emission reductions. So it has been said that the challenge with scaling renewable fuels is a chicken and egg problem. There's a high premium, and the firms that are using these fuels can't afford to pay the premiums. Airlines are low-margin businesses, by the way, despite all the charges you may see. for the extra space seating, overhead luggage, checked luggage, et cetera, they average about a 3% margin. So any one airline by themselves, if they are paying a premium potentially of 20% or more for their operating costs, because renewable fuels are about double the cost of conventional fuels, they'll go belly up pretty quickly. So we needed a way to get more players involved, and the SAF-C then recognizes the ability of a Scope 3 entity or multiple Scope 3 parties potentially contributing for this credit along with the airline, and all of these parties then can claim credit. But creating one company creating a mechanism is not enough, right? We need trust. So what we have worked with is an NGO called the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials out of Geneva, Switzerland, that is a standards body for environmental attributes, and they've created something called a book and claim system. So book and claim is a chain of custody approach that recognizes transfers between parties without a physical product moving. So the physical product and the evidence of the delivery occurs, that's recorded in the system, but then from that point on, all the other transfers happen within a digital registry. So registries play an important part here. The important piece also to think about is that a registry should be tailored for the sector. So you have an aviation registry that recognizes insets within the value chain, and that is more credible, right, than some form of offset that occurs generically anywhere in the world and is applied to a specific sector. That's the premise of the inset. And the important part now that we have a registry, we have a tracking system, there's verification of the credits, certification for parties and companies like mine, is a way then to connect this with the capital. And that's what we have done at World Energy. We, last year, announced long-term agreements with Microsoft, a Scope 3 buyer, DHL, acting both in Scope 3 and Scope 1, World Fuel Services, and in this year with the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Alliance, 8 more companies, including BCG. And all of these long-term offtakes potentially are a bankable signal. We can show that there really is willingness to pay over time. We can also demonstrate potentially a model similar to the PPA, the Power Purchase Agreement, that this shows that there is less merchant risk. We can then get loans from banks or investments, equity investments. The loans will be at a lower rate of capital, and we then in turn can pass those off to our customers. This will help scale the industry, and we want to make sure it's formal, but we know how important it is to make it a big tent. This is a collaborative effort. We're not doing this alone. So the other piece is around additionality. The long-term offtakes also show if there's a willingness to pay and there isn't enough of this commodity or product, we need partners to sign these long-term offtakes, and that this in itself should show that what we're doing goes above and beyond business as usual, right? At the heart of a voluntary market mechanism is the proof of additionality, that a company intervening, the company's action is resulting in additional emissions reductions or additional fuel displacement that would have occurred otherwise. And this is something that we believe can be demonstrated, and we're working with RSB on a standard for that as well. So will all these efforts be enough to convince the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and the Science Based Target Initiative? Current guidance does not yet recognize SAF certificates, but World Energy is forging ahead with many partners, including, as I mentioned, RMI, Smart Freight Center, RSB, and the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Alliance. Like my former Outward Bound students, I firmly believe in the carbon accounting organizations and their ability to transform. With the right expedition plan, the technical staff of SBTI can help us navigate the accounting swamp and recognize insets as an essential climate solution. Thank you. I'd like to introduce now Rick Stockberger, President and CEO of Bright Energy Innovators.
Hey, thanks. I'm on 4. Is this working? All right. Well, I spent a lot of time with ChatGPT writing this, and I was fully intending on using it, but y'all heard me sing last night that were there, and I just feel like, I'm not AI eloquent anymore. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself very quickly. I used to be in the Army. My job, I was an infantryman. I served in Afghanistan. And the last job that I had in the Army was I went to Hungary for 6 months. And I worked with Hungarian Special Forces. And I trained them. Have any of you spoke Hungarian before? Wow, that's a tough language. And I trained them to go to Afghanistan to train Afghan Special Forces, to be a combat mentor while under fire. So my job was to talk through a translator to the Hungarians, who then spoke to the Afghans in Dari or Pashto while we were getting shot at, to tell them, get down, get up, shoot back, run away, do what you got to do. And so I became relatively decent at communicating effectively. And what I want to do right now is take that force multiplication role that I had while I was in the Army and use it to tackle climate change. But I want to do it right now. So can this half of the room, real quick, if you're on this half of the room, can you raise your hand so you know who you are? All right. Can you say for me, kind of loud because it's 10:05 and we haven't had our coffee, can you please say climate? Climate. Come on. Climate. Climate. All right, this half of the room, do you know who you are? All right. Can you say can't wait? Can't wait. Let's try it again. Can't wait. Can't wait. Climate. Can't wait. Climate. Can't wait. All right. We're woken up a little bit. We're feeling good. So I'm the CEO of Bright Energy Innovators. What we do is get products to market that solve climate change faster. I said it yesterday. It's taken 5 years. It's taken 10 years to get these products to market, and we have to figure out how to do it faster. I have a core belief that people buy products because they are better for them. They're either economically better, they make their lives better. They use these products because they have a specific use case, and that's how people use their money. I think it's really, really hard to coerce people to buy things that aren't in their short-term best financial interests. I actually think about my dad a lot in this space. My dad, Union Democrat, worked in the mill for 30 years, busted his back in a blast furnace, lost his job when we sent it to other countries. And that's what I dealt with in high school. Now, more recently, he's caught a weird little bug called MAGA. And I think about it a lot because my dad, I never thought my dad was afraid of anything growing up. Anything. He's your dad. But my dad seems to be afraid of electric vehicles and solar and all of that. And we have these conversations, and we talk about it a lot. And really what's happening is my dad's on Social Security. He doesn't have much of a pension because his job left before he could actually get his 30 years of retirement. He literally lives within $15 a month of paying his bills. And I found out what my dad's actually afraid of. It's not EVs, it's not anything. My dad cares that when he flips that light switch over there, the power comes from somewhere and turns his lights on. What my dad's really afraid of is that costing more. Because then my dad's going to have to miss lunch. And my dad is afraid of missing lunch. So at Bright, we help startup companies, early stage technologies, get access to customers and capital. That's what we do. We have over 100 companies in the state of Ohio right now that we are supporting through our programs. Fun fact, we are actually in the top 5 largest programs in the country. It's just we're from the Midwest, so it's hard for us to talk about it. But yes, actually, yesterday I served on a panel moderating for my great friend Matt Peterson, CEO of LACI. We raised more capital in Ohio than they did in Los Angeles last year. So cheers to Ohio. 85% of the companies that we support at Bright are hard tech companies. Because guess what? With climate change, we're going to have to build physical products. And guess where we want those physical products built? Right next to the same mill that my dad worked in. We want to build them in Ohio. We want to build them in the Midwest. So I wouldn't be good at coaching startups if I didn't actually try to do something that I would tell a startup to do. And I have a room of a couple of hundred people here. I've got 1:23 left. That's the right direction, right? I can read that, Rick. But one of the things that I think is important, if you want to hear more about Bright, we have a small side conference tomorrow, starts at 1 o'clock after this one. Please come over to the Cleveland City Club and hear about what we're building in Northeast Ohio. We have Nana Mensu from the White House coming to talk about how they're getting capital to these earlier stage companies, small, medium-sized manufacturers. Got the Chief Operating Officer of Altium Cells coming, the head of vehicle electrification for Foxconn EV Systems, Illuminate USA's team as well. Come check that out. But most importantly, if you want to be a fellow traveler with Bright, because we need fellow travelers, because I mentioned LACI and we created more jobs, raised more capital for our startups. They operate on about $30 million a year. We operate on 3. I need your help because we want to do more of this work and we want to build more of these companies in Ohio. So we need fellow travelers to help us get the capital that we need to continue scaling, to continue building all of these companies that we can and bring these jobs back to the Midwest. Thank you so much. Next up is Elsa Mengistu from Black Girl Environmentalists.
Hello, everybody. It's kind of hard to go after Rick, not gonna lie. My name is Elsa Mengistu. I'm here today with Black Girl Environmentalists to give you a little bit about myself. I am a climate disruptor. I get my roots in climate organizing. I was one of the organizers for the Global Youth Climate March with This Is 0 Hour. We hosted it in Washington, D.C. and 25 cities across the country. And after that, I went on to co-found Generation Green, which is a global network to fortify youth leadership within the African diaspora, within the climate space. And now I'm with Black Girl Environmentalists doing similar work. So BGE, as we call it, we are a national organization dedicated to addressing the pathway and retention issues for Black women and girls within the climate sector. And we do this for girls, women, and gender expansive folk. And so our goal is to empower the emerging climate leaders. And so we are committed to supporting Black girls, gender expansive people, realize our full potential within climate leadership. We do this through our outreach and our high digital platform visibility. And so we are consistently affirming that there is space for diverse representation and experiences within our movement space. We have 3 focal points, which is narrative change, community development, and green job force development, which is where I pretty much focus a lot of my time. We connect young students, young professionals, and career experts to share experiences and resources that support pathways into the climate fields. And so we do this through our fellowship program, where we're matching 12 youth this summer with 12 paid internships, a stipend. Some of our sponsors and our collaborators for this are Stanley Cup, the Harvard Climate Action Accelerator Program, Coachtopia, and et cetera. We have an HBCU community college mentorship program, and then we also have 12 cities in our hub network. And so these 12 cities are on the ground touch point centers for community care and climate action. But what I wanted to talk to you guys about today is climate disruption and how BGE kind of came to be through one of the largest disruptions in the last few years. None of us are living under a rock, I assume. We've all been here for the pandemic, and during the pandemic, in the summer of 2020, were the movement and the uprisings for Black Lives Matter. And so BGE was created during a time where there was just mass just chaos, and no one really knew exactly what was going on. We were all afraid, but there was also just a push for people to come together and advocate for not only a cleaner earth, but a safer world for all of us. And so some people might wonder how the movement for Black lives and climate change might be linked together. One of those ways is that we have COVID-19, which is an illness attacking a respiratory system. And a lot of the communities who were disproportionately impacted by COVID are communities that are of lower income, of communities of color, Black communities, women, et cetera. And so the Bronx, one of the places that we could see disproportionate rates of childhood asthma due to pollution because of environmental racism. Those are one of the sites where there was a lot of movement for Black Lives Matter and building things of that nature. And so we kind of see that the people who are being impacted by COVID-19 are the same people that are being impacted by climate change disproportionately, first and foremost on the front lines. And so during this time, BGE was launched as an Instagram page. And so during this time, we had hundreds, thousands of people reaching out and saying, hey, oh my God, there's not a space for Black women that exists to come together. And so from that, we launched a viral campaign, and then we relaunched as a nonprofit a year ago. And from then, we have had we have built a 50,000 people community, a digital community online with 1,200 membership. And so one thing that we have noted is that Black women, we are one of the most underrepresented groups within the climate sector, but we also have the lowest retention rate within climate leadership and climate opportunities. And so out of a global disruption, health-wise, climate-wise, social-wise, BGE was kind of born to mitigate those issues that we know. And so what is really unique about BGE is that we recognize that the climate crisis is not simply an ecological crisis, but it is one that is intersectional and one that is also a skill and leadership crisis. You have a climate crisis which is disrupting our lives and it's impacting different communities at varying levels, but we're not seeing these communities being represented in leadership, in actions, in action points, et cetera. And so BGE, we are building and bridging the gap between communities who are historically left out, while also building climate solutions that are just as innovative and also empowering early career BGEs to enter the climate space and contribute to the climate solutions in a way that is holistic and applicable to all of us. And so we are really excited to continue this work. We are just a year old officially as a nonprofit, and since then we have been able to build out of a digital space into the real world with 12 cities and locations, and we're very excited to continue doing that and to continue being disruptors and collaborating with all of the people in this room and everyone who proclaims themselves to be a climate disruptor as well. I am at time.
We do have a few moments for some Q&A. I'd like to take advantage of that, maybe just a few minutes. Jen, very small, okay. But in the spirit of the moment, I'd like to first thank our disruptors and ask if we have any questions. Because if you don't, I'll start. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start. And I'll take 2 minutes for some Q&A. Maybe I can get somebody rolling. I'd like to start with Elsa and ask Elsa, you formed the organization a year ago, you said, and clearly gave us a sense of its roots, and I'd like to commend you for that. Of the activities you have going right now and thinking of the people in this room, can you pick one activity that you could ask the people in this room to approach you in the hallway to talk about? What would be the most important initiative we could help support?
I think one of the most important initiatives is our Green Job Force Development. As I said, we have our Hazel M. Johnson Fellowship, which is named after the mother of environmental justice. We're going to be placing 12 students at 12 different sites this summer. We also have Career Days, which is a program we're launching. We're going to be taking groups of students, and we're going to be taking them to basically career day visits at different environmental companies, startups, firms, all over the entire career space. And we're going to be exposing young people to career paths that they may have not otherwise have known. And we're in the process for searching for partners for that right now. And then we have a ton of other Green Job Force development opportunities that we are developing for high school students, college students, and early career BGEs.
Great, thank you. Questions? Yes, we have a question.
Hi, thank you. Ashley Allen with CSO Copilot. My question's for Adam. So two quick questions. I think the work you were talking about around the book and claim system for sustainable aviation fuel is super exciting, and it's, probably all of us care about it because we all get on planes, right? And I'm just wondering two things. One, what's your sense of sort of a willingness to move on the part of the accounting professionals to accept the system that you're developing, and just how do you feel like that reception has been? And then two, what do you see as kind of the next step? Like, where is it going to continue to build trust and credibility in that work?
Excellent questions. So, as people may know, in the carbon accounting world, the first action that you need to take is to reduce your emissions. So when we have engaged directly with groups like World Resources Institute and WBCSD, World Council for Sustainable Development, they have almost a religious belief that first you've got to be responsible, don't take the flight, right? And we know that we need aviation. Besides delivering critical medical supplies, personnel during pandemics, connecting us between oceans and within our own country, and getting leaders to the negotiating table in person, this is a critical industry. So this piece has been a little bit of a stumbling block because the NGOs are saying, or fly less or don't fly. So what we need to show is that there's a credible approach and that we have enough buy-in, and it's done in a transparent manner, that these registries release the way that they share more about their mechanics so people can understand and trust them. And for people to get involved, we need early movers that are confident to act without actually getting that stamp of approval or recognition from SBTI or the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So I would say that is really critical. If you know someone at the World Resource Institute, just contact your senator. Just let them know how important that insets are in terms of decarbonizing not just aviation, but all the hard-to-abate sectors. So reaching out, I think that could be a critical piece. So I think that is where all of us can be really impactful. And so we will also see, I think, in terms of what's up ahead, there is new guidance coming out from SBTI, and probably reaching out to Science Based Targets Initiative too, and saying, look, this is something we want to see, the ability to decarbonize, not just reducing our flights, but a way for us to have a recognized mechanism. So stay tuned for that, and if you have a way of getting involved and sharing your perspective with the SBTI Technical Working Group, I think that would be super helpful too.
Thank you, Adam. One last question? Nope? Okay. What I would suggest is if you're interested, please approach any of our panelists throughout the rest of the day and during our break. Thank you very much to all of you.